Well, welcome once again to ARTbreak, everyone. We're going to continue with our series of presenting artists that are represented in this year's West Michigan Area Show. Today, our guests are Nicole Maury and Elijah Hamilton-Wray. We're going to start with Nicole Maury. She is a professor of print media at the Gwen Frostick School of Arts at WMU, a position she's held since 2004. And she is also the curator of the university's print collection. As an artist, she's exhibited nationally and internationally, and her works really extend beyond the boundaries of traditional print media, and she develops her concepts with a variety of innovative approaches. Her recent series, called In Its Place, explores the idea of home and how her own experiences of living in many different places, particularly during childhood, really made this concept for her somewhat complicated and at times contentious. And one of the works in this series, In Its Place, Stewart, is represented in the KIA show, and you can see that in the second gallery afterwards. Might just add too that 2008, Nicole also received the Wardney Purchase Prize for one of her works, which is now in the KIA collection. So please welcome Nicole Maury.
All right, well, thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate you taking time out of the middle of your day. And obviously thank you to the KIA for inviting me to speak here today. I just wanted to, say as I was walking through the galleries, and I've been to the show a couple of times now, that I think that the quality of the work in this show is particularly good. I really am enjoying the way it's laid out in the space. So I think that the juror, Allison Wong, did a really good job this year with the show. So I'm happy to be part of that. So thank you, Greg. I mean, he pretty much said everything I need to say, but I will continue anyways. All right. So this is the piece that I have in the show, if you haven't been in there already. It's from, as Greg said, a series called In Its Place, and that's a series I've been working on for about the past year. I've really been lucky enough to be on sabbatical from Western for this past year and kind of spend all of my time delving into this particular project. For some context, it's a screen print. It's about 26 by 26 inches, just to give you a sense of the scale. And it's really hard to see the text on the very bottom of the image. So it just says Stewart Avenue, 2004 to 2007, because I can't expect you to read that. So this piece is one that I'll be talking about, but also the larger body of work that it belongs to, with a few sort of side steps into past work as well, just to give this work more context. But before I do that, let me talk a little bit more broadly about my work. If you're not familiar with it, because, why would you be? But some of you are local, some of you know my work. I don't know everybody else. So I'm one of those artists whose work kind of evolves in a bit of a straight line. I play with media and techniques and dimensionality and a variety of sort of formal components in my work, but it's always born from the same place. All of my work comes from issues of home and identity, with a real focus on process. Process is really important in my work, and you'll see that as I talk about some of these other pieces. Now that I see this slide in person, I'm like, that's a lot. It's big. And the reason that it's big is because the crux of my work that I'm talking about is the fact that as Greg alluded to, I've lived in a lot of places in my life, 24 so far. It's a pretty big number. And it's big enough that I've developed some complicated feelings towards, the idea of home and even just the word itself. All of these frequent interruptions, especially when I was a kid, where I might move homes or schools multiple times a year, it really left me with this kind of incomplete set of memories. There's a lot that is just sort of missing from my memory bank as far as experiences when I was a kid. And so, unfortunately, my parents are no longer with us, so I can't kind of look to them to fill in those gaps. So what has happened is, as an artist, I've used my work to sort of create some sort of logic out of my experiences and to fill those gaps in for myself and to answer as best I can some of those unanswered questions. So we'll go back in time just a little bit. As a kid, I really looked to school as a coping mechanism. I definitely gravitated towards the rules and repetition, that those systems in place in the educational system that don't change. That was really a comfort to me. Things like counting and spelling and handwriting, the rote memorization of facts. That was really my kind of safe space. And so as an artist, it's not surprising that it has sort of wormed its way into my work as well. And these are just some examples of, those kind of systems that I'm talking about. This isn't my work, but this is. So these are a couple of pieces that I made way back in grad school, about 2003. And at that time, I was looking really closely at those kind of early systems of learning. On the left is a screen print called How I Learned My ABCs. A is for appease. And what I was trying to do at that time was I was trying to reconcile the kind of simple, easy systems that you learn in school that kind of explain the world in this very black and white way with the lessons that I was learning in my own life, which were much more complicated, and often sort of dysfunctional in my home life. So there's one print for every letter of the alphabet. And then the one on the right is a related series that I created. So there's also one for every letter of the alphabet. And this one is actually interactive. So what happened was the image itself is screen printed. And then I invited participants or, viewers in the gallery to come in and add their kind of interpretation of what that, D is for. So they gave, all manner of responses from very serious to less serious. Some of them got a little profane in some of the letters, but this was a clean one, so I can show this one in public. And what I love is that the red marker that someone's gone in there with was not me. Someone went in after the show was kind of coming to an end and circled all the spelling errors for me. So I wish I had had a chance to do that. I really love, that part of it. So there's this element of, things that I can't control in that particular show that I really enjoyed. So, as an artist, I'm also fascinated by just how we're taught about creativity and self-expression. The print by numbers on the left and the coloring books on the right are really perfect examples of how, we learn at a very young age that there's a right way to, kind of express yourself, to make an image, to approach these very important parts of ourselves. I spent a lot of time with coloring books when I was a kid too. So thinking about this resulted in this piece, which is called Paint by Numbers, Vine Road. It's from 2012. I had to look at that date. And there are 18 individual panels here. They're each about 18 by 24 to give you a sense of scale. So the whole thing is about 12 feet wide, by about 6 feet tall. So it's quite large. And I have some variations of this kind of work. I have, other ones that I've done that were based on actual, found paint by number paintings that I have. and some that I did as part of an artist residency. But unfortunately, the images of those aren't so great. So this one was one that I showed in 2014, actually, as part of a show I had up at Western. And, I took that formula of the paint by numbers and I deconstructed it. I extracted all the various colors. I'll show you kind of a process image after this, and I separated them out and turned them into solid black. And then those black images were hand painted onto wooden panels. And then when they were framed, they're framed with a kind of semi-transparent plexiglass, kind of milky, so that it pushes the image back a little bit, makes it more, ghostly, kind of more blurry. So that is intentional and not just your eyesight, if that's what you're worried about. Let's see here. So this is sort of the behind the scenes, right? Because I think because my work is so much about process, I find it interesting just to kind of see how people get from point A to point B in their work. So this piece starts with the photograph up there on the far left. And in this case, this is a photograph of, it's not actually a place I lived, but it's a place my parents lived after I moved away from home. It was this farmhouse. And then that image, so it was a personal image, not just, a found kind of image. And then the image on the right was where I took that photograph and I created a line drawing in that style of the paint by numbers of it. Then on the bottom left, I went in, and this all happened digitally at this point, so I had to get very comfortable with the computer, which at that point was not necessarily my favorite companion, but I grew to love it. And I filled in all the colors kind of in reference to the photo. And then to the right of that, you can see where I'm extrapolating each color separately. And then they were, created in black on the final pieces. I think I go back to it, yeah. So that's kind of where it came from and where it ended up. So it was really important for me to not have the color in this piece, I think because of the psychological element that it represented and the kind of, not so cheery history that I was referencing in the work itself. It would have felt very different if I had left it in color. So that's why it remains in black and white. Okay, a couple more before we get to the actual work here. On the left is staying inside the lines, and on the right is all evidence suggests otherwise. So these were some pieces I was doing, around 2004, 2005, after I had graduated from the University of Iowa, and I was here teaching at Western, kind of at the beginning of my tenure here. And these works I'm showing just so you can see that I was continuing to kind of plug into those early systems and structures. These two particular pieces really rely on the grid as part of their, visuals. And if you look at the detail underneath the image on the left, you can see that there's also kind of a numbering system. It's very small, so it's hard to see in the pieces themselves. So there's this tension between these really kind of rigid systems and also these hand-drawn, more personal elements within the work that kind of have this conversation with each other. So it creates this narrative that's more of a suggestion than anything, really straightforward. And this is a piece from 2014 as well. It's called Abridged. And in this particular work, I went into a dictionary and I cut out all of the, the images in the dictionary, which are originally engravings, but I physically cut them out of the dictionary, which I felt bad about, but I got over it. I've collected a lot of that kind of material, dictionaries and ledgers and lists and, scientific manuals. I just have tons of that stuff. So once I got over that, I cut them into little pieces, the images out, and cut them into even little smaller pieces, and then arranged them essentially, just by tone. This piece is, I think, about 24 by 24, give or take. And I had a grid that was printed on the paper, inkjet printed on the paper, before I physically attached, collaged the dictionary pieces directly onto it. So again, it goes back to these issues because it's coming from the dictionary of education, authority, and the subjectivity of meaning. And of course, this is from an abridged dictionary, which means abbreviated, right? So already there's this kind of conversation about the narrowing and dictating of what information we're being given. This is very hard to see. There will be a detail. I just wanted to give you a sense of the whole, because there are 24 panels here, but this you can see a little bit better. This is a piece called Translated. It's more recent. It's from 2019. And like the work in the area show, each one of these images began as a place that I've lived. So I'm getting into the kind of, the work that preceded that work. And so what it's doing is it's transforming these very concrete places, photographs, into really sort of abstract things. And so memory is acting as here as a filter, sort of decoding and redefining my memories, essentially, my experiences and the memories of them. And again, there's a hand-drawn element, which a lot of my work has, because it's, as much as I enjoy the computer and use it as a tool, for me, that hand-drawn element is very important in terms of the personal, in terms of this being autobiographical work and not just, while a lot of my work is really repetitious and laborious, I'm asked all the time, well, you could just do that on the computer. You don't have to do it by hand, or, but that process, that doing it over and over, the kind of ritualistic nature of it, that's important too to the work. And so this is a little bit of a point A to B example as well. So the image on the left is kind of where those started. Looks very different. They're based on floor plans that I drew of these, various houses and apartments and such that I lived in. But they're all done from memory. So, they're semi-accurate. The farther back I go, the less information there kind of is for me to feed into it. And as you get kind of, more current chronologically, you'll notice in the work that there's just a lot more information. So this is somewhere near the end. And so that image is made. And then in the middle, you'll see that those images, or that image on the left, is translated essentially into a series of dots. And they are the same as the vectors if you're using the kind of digital program that is the drawing program, Illustrator, that I used. But so they become a little bit like, locators. They become almost geographical in nature. And then on the far right, I've just simply connected all those dots with lines to get back to the almost final image. So at that point, I take that image, I print it out from the computer, I put it under Mylar, which is a semi-transparent film, and I trace it all by hand. So, again, it has that hand-drawn element, and, that gets us back to here. So everything nothing is direct. It's all this, series of steps before I get to anything. That's kind of the fun part. So that brings me back to the piece in the area show and the kind of series of work that's from. So I've talked about home and memory and process, and the various influences I've had. And they're all very, linear and logical things that I'm sharing with you. But I wanted to interject just for a moment to do something that also serves to communicate something about the work. So bear with me for a minute as I'm going to read something. It's not long, but you may feel free to close your eyes if you wish and just kind of absorb it. It's coming up here. All right, so you don't need to look at anything. But I do need to adjust something on here because I can't see all of it. Oh, here we go. All right. A steep hill, blue flowered linoleum, a broken rabbit hutch, the impossibly blue sky after the hurricane, homemade birthday cakes in tarnished sheet pans, my sister's foot in the doorway, dark wood paneling and duct-taped keyholes, salmon-colored roses, desserts cooling on the porch, Elvis on the top shelf, sitting on the back steps while my brother cries, watching the orange van drive away, noises from the street below, brown shag carpet that never felt clean, a dark green couch too rough to sleep on, my dad's dresser, the sound of plastic on the windows in winter, unwanted feelings of deja vu, Maggie in a chair in the corner, a cordless phone in the end of a relationship, standing in the closet talking to my mom for the last time, a crow's head in the backyard, Christmas lights in the maple tree, difficult conversations, and woods that make me feel invisible. Okay. I read that because that's actually part of the artist statement that I wrote for this work when I had a show of some of it back in February. And at the kind of opening reception for that show, a gentleman came up to me and he's like, "You should read that out loud," and which is not something I ever would have considered doing. But he wouldn't leave me alone about it. He's like, "I really think you should. I really think you should." I'm like, "Okay, I'll do it." And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the images that it conjures up. I enjoy what it gives the work that all of this sort of factual information doesn't. It's more, it's more emotional. It's more psychological, I think. And so, I thought I'd try it. But now we have to go back to that world of practicalities. See where I'm at on time. Okay, I'm almost done here. So this is just a few examples of other work from that series, just to give you a sense of what they look like. I will be having a show of all of the work completed in August at Western's Richmond Center for Visual Art. So you're welcome to come to that. I have the dates at the end here, but that will be all of the work, so you can see it in its full glory. And then as I see I'm running out of time, I'm going to just show you a couple quick things, and then I'll take time for questions if you have any. So I had a kind of behind the scenes set of slides for this work too, but I'll just kind of fly through them just so you can, again, kind of see how it got from A to B. So, it starts with the photograph. This particular work, Stuart, is from a place I lived here in Kalamazoo, down in the, historic neighborhood. It's simplified into a line drawing. And then that line drawing is brought into Illustrator, and all of the sort of, because it's in that paint by number style, all of those pieces are sort of pulled apart and reorganized so that they no longer make sense together as a full image. And then they're reorganized into the image that you see on the right. So this is, the screen that I'm staring at for, 50 hours before I get to this image done. And once that image is done on the computer, again, I need that hand element for myself. So I decided to make these into screen prints because I could have digitally printed them, But so this is just a shot of my studio and some of those works kind of being printed, and then me on the right, doing the labor of it. So, then you get to that really sort of final product. And this is just that work in a show I had in Chicago. Just to give you a sense of what it looks like in a space. And this was a very quiet show with only about 13 pieces and some wooden relief pieces that I came up with at the last minute just to fill in some of those gaps. But the show at Western in the fall will be much more intense because it'll have all the work. I haven't quite worked out all the details yet, but that's the fun part. So that's coming. I'm not going to show you any of this. And I'm going to say, if you have more questions, you can go to my website, you can email me, you can go to Instagram, follow me. There's the dates for my show. I don't know what the reception for the show is yet, but you can go to the Frostig School of Art or the Richmond Center's websites, and I'll post some stuff about that as it gets closer. But I absolutely invite you all to come and see the show. And if anybody has some questions right now, I'm happy to take a couple of them before I give the floor to Elijah. I don't want to take up his time. Yes.
So a final image obviously has meaning because it came from somewhere. How does the viewer appreciate that or know that, or does the viewer need to know?
Okay, so I have to repeat the questions for the live streaming situation here. So you're asking me that the meaning or the image obviously has meaning, but how does the viewer know that, right? Because they don't know all the places I've lived, they don't know the history, they don't know all the kind of behind the scenes stuff that I'm showing you. I think it's more the feeling they're going to get standing in front of these. They're very intense and graphic and sort of chaotic in nature. And when you see that they're all based on addresses, you start to make some connections, but I don't think they need to know all of that information. I think it's more that kind of physical response that they're going to have in front of the work, particularly when you have all of the work together. I don't think it works as well with a singular piece, although I think it still works. But with the group, it's really quite kind of a sensory experience. So does that answer that question? Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Yes.
Nicole, what age were you when you decided to pursue art?
What age was I when I decided to pursue art? 18. I mean, my parents were very working class. I didn't have a lot of exposure to arts, and they weren't artists. But I did have a stepdad of my stepdad who was a painter that was influential. But I didn't really get to know him until I was in high school. And it was kind of, I had always drawn and been, interested in that stuff, but I never really thought about it as a career. But no one really ever talked to me about that stuff. Like school wasn't, none of my family had gone to college. Some hadn't even graduated high school. So there weren't conversations about, what you were going to be doing with your life. It was just like me saying, I like art. I guess I'll try that. And I knew that this person, Frank, had gone to the Art Institute in Chicago. So I said, I guess I'll do that. And I guess I need to make money, so I'll go into graphic design. And I didn't like that so much. So I took a, printmaking class and fell in love with that. And, the rest is sort of history, as they say. Anyone else? No, feel free to talk to me after this, or like I said, contact me in any way you like. But thank you very much for giving me your time and coming out to see this. I hope you learned something. I certainly did putting this together. So thank you very much. I don't know how to work a PC. I'm not sure how to bring up Elijah's.
Well, our second artist is Elijah Hamilton-Wray. He is also a Kalamazoo artist, and his focus has been on portraits and often self-portraits, which he uses as a way of exploring his own identity, as well as the balance between an individual and social influences. What makes his work unique is that he employs a realistic style to create these strikingly unexpected images, which is true of the piece in the West Michigan area show called Don't Say the Idiom. And you can see that when you walk into the main gallery on the wall immediately to your left. Should add too that this piece won the Martin Maddox Prize for Imaginative Realism this year. And you look at it and notice that it's basically a self-portrait, but he includes only specific features of his image, the hair, the cap, the blindfold, and then the mouth. And as a result, you get these very provocative images where things are in one sense very familiar and realistic, but they also open up a whole different way of viewing the image. So please welcome Elijah Hamilton-Wray.
All right. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I think I learned a little bit about my art right there too. So, okay, so I will be presenting on my art today. Not only the piece that I have in the area show, but also the series that is a part of, and kind of a look back on how I got there. Everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. All right. So as was mentioned in my introduction here, I am a portrait artist mainly, and I use portrait to kind of explore identity and individuality. And I notice when I'm painting portraits, especially of others, and people that I'm familiar with, like in everyday life, it's often something that I can go deeper into knowing a person and discovering more about them, reminiscing about times we had together. So it's sort of therapeutic too, and brings memory into it. So I'll talk a little bit about my early influences in the art world. This picture on the left is, I think, something I did in about the third grade. It's a superhero of myself. So doing self-portrait all the way back in third grade. That I believe we got to make them into magnets, and so it's still on the fridge at my parents' house. And this image on the right is a cover of a comic book that me and my brother used to collect called Ultimate Spider-Man, that came out, I believe, in like the early 2000s, and it might still be on its run. But I always remember just loving the covers of these and the art style, and just how like exaggerated this figurative work was. I'm sure I didn't phrase it like that back in the day, but that's what I was thinking. And I always loved the idea of comic book art because comic book and I guess anime, which I was also a big fan of back in the day, and still to this day, because I love the idea that the storytelling was so tied so closely to the style of art, and you can't really have one without the other in those mediums. So I used to kind of mimic those styles, and that's what really got me into my art and really loving figurative work. So I really got into doing art like really seriously during my freshman year of college when I took a drawing class, and it kind of reinvigorated my love of artwork. So this picture on the left is just a self-portrait that we did in class, which would be the first of many, as it turns out. And then the one in the middle, it was one from a watercolor class that was a distorted portrait of my brother. And then on the right, again, my first oil painting class, I did another self-portrait, as we had that as a project. So then we move on to my senior year. I'm still working with these figures, and it's kind of incorporating that level of comic books, except in a way that ties it into like a fine art, because comic book art is kind of known as a low art style, which I don't personally believe, but that's what, and I'd like to, I wanted to like bring these comic book characters into a world where they don't belong, and kind of give them like the gravitas that I see in them. So it was a series of 4 paintings. These 2 right here, about 4 by 6 feet large. And then after undergrad, I went into a year where I didn't exactly know what I was going to do, but kept on doing my art practice, and really started going into these portraits that weren't that time involved, but that had a kind of strange quality to them. As you see with like the different colored skins here, these vibrant backgrounds, the lack of like facial features in some of them. And I really liked where that was going. So I went off to grad school in Vermont at Northern Vermont University, very, very small town called Johnson. Very beautiful. You can see the mountains from anywhere, but I think the town had like 1,000 people in it. So it was very remote. I didn't have anything to do except to paint. So I got, I would say, pretty good at technically painting during my time there. And being able to kind of explore what I wanted to do with all the time in the world to paint. So just going in there and just putting as many ideas down on the canvas as I could. As you see on the one on the left, it kind of has that same quality as the painting out in the show, where it's missing certain elements of the person. And the one on the right, it has this quality where it's in a surreal setting, and the figure is unencumbered, just sitting on the moon. I started moving into a little bit more traditional painting, portrait painting, after a while, and it was really great to be able to like explore some friendships and some familial relationships through these paintings. I like to leave a white background so I can really focus on the person being portrayed. Maybe include something about them, like my friend here with his camera. He's a videographer. Or something maybe a little bit surreal with this kind of light bulb, as it like sparks an idea in my one friend's head. So the same with these ones right here. This one on the left that I titled American Grandpa is a portrait I did of my own grandfather, that is loosely based on Archibald Motley's portrait of his grandmother, and that same kind of like stoic pose there, with not a lot going on in the background, and really getting to like see the man he was through his the work clothes that he wore every day, the Cleveland Indians hat that he always wore every day, and just trying to portray as much of him as I could through painting. So still in grad school, I actually went on a trip to Cuba, and it was very funny because during that trip, I noticed all the kind of iconography toward the kind of three father figures of Cuba, and how differently they were portrayed everywhere. Especially the figure on the left, Jose Marti, who he was portrayed in Cuba a lot of like public art spaces or public spaces, sometimes with a realistic rendition of him, but other times they would like exaggerate his forehead a lot. And this is something I kind of tried to do through these playful caricatures of those historical, controversial in America kind of historical figures there. One thing I didn't want to lose, though, when I went to grad school was my love of comics and that kind of fun art that I see it as. So something that I tried to do every once in a while was just to paint something for me and give a different look at these comic book characters that so many people, especially in the past years when this kind of phenomenon has become bigger, recognized. So at the end of my graduate school, I had my MFA show where I wanted to really delve into self-portraiture, but not in the regular way. These two paintings here, I think they're about 15 inches by 49 inches, so they're tall and long, that show like my own disembodied head just going through different different spaces. I like the idea of having an ambiguous background and not leaving much space to be able to tell what's going on in the painting. And really have this kind of like graphic image of myself, but also have it be pretty like funny. You know, I see these as like pretty comical pieces, even though it, I guess, portrays my own death in a way. So this picture on the left is just kind of an example of what I use when I'm painting these kind of paintings. I like to take a lot of pictures of myself and kind of get the expression that I want, and maybe use a few of them to really get the expressive face or hairstyle or anything that I'm going for in any of these paintings. So that's another example of this. Against one of those another ambiguous backgrounds. Could be a sunset, could be a desert, you know. Could be the sun hitting water. I'd like to keep it a little bit ambiguous here. So talking about my love of comics again, this picture on the left is one that I drew, I think in 5th grade, a comic book cover that I recreated as a self-portrait in my MFA show. So I like the influence of comic, and there's a little influence of anime in there as well. This is kind of the most traditional self-portrait I did for that show, but I still like to have this surreal element of sitting in kind of nothingness. And this one is based off of loosely based off of a CD cover of one of my favorite artists, Mac Miller, and his CD was called Swimming, so I named mine Drowning. And it holds like different pieces of me. This the band you see on my arm is one that I wore for a while. And this one portrays me again, of course, but as myself and as an older version of myself. So this one is more of like a narrative-based one. It kind of tells a story, but it's, I think, the only one of that kind, really, where I try and really have these characters bounce off of one another, as one kind of looks down and the other is staring right at him as I'm staring at my older self here. So talk a tiny bit about my influences here. I really love the work of Wiley. In this one, he is basing it off of a Renaissance painting in which two women behead a man, but in this one, you have this woman with the disembodied head of another woman, which is kind of where I got the ideas for the disembodied head pieces. Kerry James Marshall, just one of my favorite pieces. I love his use of story in his paintings. This one is kind of a more traditional painting of his. He usually has more going on in them, but just the black figure, which he brings to the forefront, and the kind of beauty of that. And then Alex Ross, who is a comic book artist, but he uses oil paints to kind of create these grandiose versions of superheroes, and it gives like a very gives a lot of depth to them, I think, especially with the amount of shadow that he tends to use in his work. I think it's just some of my favorite work. Okay, so now I'm going to get on to my new works, including the one that I have in this show. These works I've started about a year and a half ago, and I like to paint in series when I can, when I have an idea that I think is good enough or has enough to it to kind of create more and more works without it getting stale. So I kind of created the limits for myself, or the rules, I guess, of these paintings that I follow for the most part, but I break sometimes. But I like the idea of having a series of paintings like that. So for the process with these, I take pictures of myself. I use my hair in these kind of weird ways. On the one on the far left, I'm literally upside down with a timed camera trying to take that picture. That one took a while, actually, and just to kind of get the flow of what I want to do. So I call this series Faces. There are 8 paintings in total so far. I might be done, I might not be. We'll see if I have any inspiration later. But part of the series is kind of bringing the identity to the forefront, using these monochromatic backgrounds of all different colors, and really accentuating the features of the face, even though I leave out certain areas like the nose, the eyes, but I love putting the mouth in just because I feel like that part of the face is so expressive. And also, it forces the viewer to kind of imagine what the rest of the face might look like. This one called Close Contacts I started this in the winter of 2022, so still in the midst of the pandemic, kind of thinking about that, thinking about everyone wearing masks, what that takes away from the face. But in this instance, actually being able to make something of the face because it's there. You get the bridge of the nose through the mask, which is something that usually the mask is taking away from people. This one, don't say the idiom, is one that I use a blindfold that gives a little bit of structure to the face, but it's just another way of taking away the eyes. And don't say the idiom, of course. It relates to the biting of the tongue that you see with this piece. So, as I was saying, I don't have eyes in mine usually, but this one I felt like I needed to switch it up a little bit, but make it kind of more strange, kind of invoke that sense of stress with the biting of the lip, the blood dripping from crevices in the face, This one done around the holidays is kind of an inspiration for that. But and then in these last two, I began to start putting a bit of motion and changing the dimensions of the canvas for some of these works. And as you saw in the reference photos of me upside down, you see the hair falling, turning that canvas either way, actually, and then seeing what that does to the piece. So that is my most recent series, Faces, and thank you for coming out, and thank you for listening. Yes, sir.
I just got a question that's not specifically related to your, but do you draw every day? Do you paint every day?
So the question was, do I draw or paint every day? I try to, but it won't be like it'll probably be painting on something that I've been doing for a while. So not like a new painting or new drawing every day. Although I'm really trying to start getting to that habit of like creating more quick stuff. Yeah.
You like doing pictures of your grandpa?
I'm sorry.
Do you like drawing your grandpa?
It was the question was, did I like doing the painting of my grandpa? Yeah, I did. It was kind of it was an interesting experience just because it's someone I've known for so long, of course, but someone that that you don't really like come in that close kind of contact with, and being able to kind of study the facial features and everything about him was a really eye-opening experience. Yes, Mom?
I noticed that as you trajected your work up to today, like more and more it seems to be extracted in each kind of phase. You talked about the background, then as you move to this newer series, the actual features, the abstraction seems to be more exaggerated. Can you talk about maybe that, or was that something that you thought about or intentional or?
Okay, so the question was about the kind of continual abstraction, or like the more progressive abstraction of my work as I go on. I think that I love the idea of being technically good at painting. I think it's a skill set that is like fun to have because you're able to do so much with it. But I also like the idea of making your paintings something unique. So I think that abstraction, along with the kind of realism, allows me to stretch my like two muscles at once. So it's my like traditional muscle, and then also the other abstract muscle that I think makes work more interesting. Yeah. All right. Oh, we got one more over here.
Yes, I felt that your first portraits of people that you knew, at the beginning, I felt a lot of emotion in the faces that you really kind of captured each individual. Sometimes through the eyes more to me. But do you feel like even you're doing more abstraction and realism, do you feel that there's the emotional continuation? Is that for yourself or I just wondered if you had something? So that's
So the question was a kind of commenting on the emotion that I put into the portraits of other people, and whether that continues through like the work now. If that's kind of okay. So I think it's because I'm the one portraying this person through usually just pictures of them. I feel like I have kind of an obligation to like dig deeper than just making a likeness of them. I try to like put that emotion, trying to give a person their essence through the piece, not just their likeness. And when I am doing paintings of myself, I suppose that I try to do that, but I don't feel obligated in that way too. I don't think, because it feels like it's like for me and not for someone else, All right. Thank you for all the wonderful questions.